Hi, my name is Henry Stever. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Nacd, the National Association for Corporate Directors. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Nacd BoardVision, our online platform focused on helping corporate directors and boards serve as strategic assets for the enterprise. Today, I'm joined by Marianne Cloyd, the leader for PwC's Center for Board Governance. Thanks for joining me today, Marianne.
Oh, Henry, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
In this episode of Nacd BoardVision, Marianne and I are going to be talking about performance metrics that can really help the enterprise create long-term sustainable value. Last week we were in Los Angeles for an Nacd Directorship 2020 event, and we talked a lot about performance metrics and how they can evolve and what really the board should be focused on to create long-term value. In today's day and age with technology, does sustainable competitive advantages really exist today?
One of the concepts that was raised in Los Angeles was there such a thing as sustainable competitive advantage? Now, what I don't think is that I don't remember anyone coming to a conclusion as to yes, there was or there wasn't, but the dialogue around it was quite interesting. And if we could expand a little bit on metrics and how that factors into it, because there's also a lot of discussion, if you will, and again, one that we've had before about the balance between long-term metrics and short-term metrics. And to me, it's just one of the most challenging dialogues, and I don't know that I've heard anybody come to the definitive answer yet, other than to the agreement that you need to have both. I mean, that when you're looking at metrics, there need to be metrics that focus on both the long-term and the short-term.
Building on long-term, short-term, I'm going to really look at metrics or ask your perspective about metrics between backward-looking and forward-looking. So one of the things that we try to do a lot at Nacd, and I'm sure you do at PwC as well, is really help create anticipatory awareness. What should people be thinking about? Because when typically TSR, whether it's total shareholder return or total stakeholder return, that's backwards looking in the rearview mirror. And as directors, we need to be looking towards the future to make sure that our strategies and our metrics are appropriate to sustain that competitive edge. So I'm wondering if you have seen kind of key metrics and how that dialogue exists in the boardroom about balancing forward-looking and backward-looking metrics.
Well, and again, I think that to me, one of the challenges that I would pose to a board working with management is to come up with whatever it is for your company. And I don't believe that it's going to necessarily be the same for everybody. But how do you define metrics, and by define and agree them between the board and management that use these backward-looking statistics, if you will, or metrics to really be informative about what's happening in the future. And also something that came up in LA is can you challenge yourself as a company? And again, with agreement between the board and manage to find what I think someone defined as an agility metric.
Right.
So looking at an agility metric as a way of measuring how you're staying competitive and staying ahead.
Right. So I think it's interesting when you talk about the agility metrics, forward-looking, backward-looking, big data. There's a lot of things going on there from a dialogue perspective. How does the board, how does a director for that matter, really understand and what are the right metrics he or she should be asking for from management, and how do you kind of understand what are the right things to make sure the strategy is in place?
Well, again, it's something that has to be discussed, designed between the board and management with agreement, between them, among them, as to what those metrics are going to be, how they're going to be used, and also as a board member, how these metrics can be informative to you to help with your understanding of the business. Because I think that's something else we don't want to lose sight of, is that one of your key tasks as part of being effective in your oversight role is understanding the business. In fact, I believe you could not properly do that oversight role unless you do understand the business, and the right metrics, I think, can be a useful tool there too.
How do you allocate your time and really define what are the right metrics that can help monitor the performance of the company and really get behind those numbers?
You're not management, that's not your role, but I do believe you have a responsibility, and as far as the time, it's sort of like it takes what it takes. There was another phrase that came out of our meeting in Los Angeles, which is, I think I heard one of the directors use the term there, that what you really want to be is a learning board. So, and I think that was a great way of describing it. So you want to be a learning board, you want to be a learning director, which means it's not a static process, which means you're always having to adjust. And Henry, and if there's just one other point that I could make about metrics, because I heard a phrase used somewhere recently, and again, going back to what we've talked about before with big data and everything that's out there, I heard the phrase used of vanity metrics. Yeah. And I thought it was the greatest description, because I'd not heard it before, but I thought it was very instructive, and that's that to be cautious that you don't let yourself get caught up in just these, these metrics that make you feel good, that may not be getting at the heart of the information that you really need.
Well, it certainly is an exciting time, as we mentioned on previous episodes of BoardVision, and I'm sure we will in the future. But I personally believe that Nacd and PwC are adding a tremendous amount of value in helping directors anticipate the unknown, because as we will talk about into the future, we don't know what we don't know, but we do know that we don't know everything.
Absolutely.
On behalf of Nacd, PwC, Marion, and myself, thanks for joining us today on this episode of Nacd BoardVision.